Here we see an appropriate illustration of the biosphere with many interactions between the earth, air, and water. As we see with the small water droplet, the water cycle, in which water is recycled through living organisms, the ground, and the atmosphere, is present. The nitrogen cycle is also appropriate here, as nitrogen is being consumed from the ground by tree roots and eventually released as a gas or by decomposition. Another cycle, the carbon cycle, is apparent in the trees taking in carbon and releasing it in respiration, or by eventually being broken down into fossil fuels and released into the air again through emissions. All of these factor into the climate, which is every part of the weather. Today it is somewhat chilly with a slight breeze and is overcast. Density is seen in the multiple plant populations under the log, quite packed but not to the point of overcrowding. Many diverse species live here, dispersed somewhat evenly across the soil. This can also connect to the concepts of taxis and kinesis. The worm is attempting to move away from the stimulus, in this case the light and the cold air, and is searching for a hole to find a comfortable state, a form of kinesis. This differs from taxis, which would be an innate automatic response to a stimulus. In this picture, multiple factors are contributing to the niche in which the younger trees are growing. An abiotic factor, possibly wind or lightning, caused the tree on the right to break and fall. Biotic factors, the bacteria and other decomposers in the soil, then broke down the tree into fertile dirt for the new life to grow from. The multiple interactions between different species, moss, trees, decomposers, other animals, forms a viable ecosystem. This is also a good picture of a snapshot of the larger biome, temperate forest with many deciduous tree species.
Commensalism is shown in this picture by the mushroom growing on the tree. The mushroom is benefiting by growing off the ground away from animals, while the tree doesn't gain anything. This can be compared to mutualism, where two species benefit from working together, and parasitism, where one species benefits and has a negative effect on the other species. Herbivory is the process of eating the plants such as the leaves growing on the trees, while predation is the process of a predator hunting their prey, such as a coyote hunting a bunny. Ethology is the study of animal behavior, which all of us took part in when learning about the different species native to the dunes and what they do, as well as by simply observing them. If we were to delve deeper into the animal's behavior and understanding, we might use a cognitive map, which looks at how an animal will process information and respond to it. This toad, let's pretend it's alive, is a fine example of operant conditioning. If the toad were to eat a nasty-tasting bug, it would learn to associate the bad taste with that bug and would not eat it in the future. In contrast, classical conditioning associates a certain stimulus with a response and a reward. Training the toad to respond to something like a whistle by rewarding it with a grasshopper. It's a stretch, I know. Imprinting is an animal learning that another animal is its parent through habitual trust. For example, a bird will catch the toad and bring it back to the nest as food. The baby birds will then learn that this bird is its parent.
Animals learn in a variety of ways, but the most evident in this photo is spatial learning, which is learning through observation of the environment. In this scenario, a rabbit may look around the sky and realize through the lack of leaves that hawks are more likely to see it, which would be observing the environment to learn something. This can also lead to cases of altruism, where one animal recognizes the threat, such as the rabbit recognizing the endangering hawk. Even though the rabbit will die in the process, it can sacrifice itself for reasons that we can only assume, such as already having passed on its genes to the neighboring rabbit. This photo can also show habituation, whereas if it is the first time an animal is experiencing autumn, then leaves falling from trees may be a strange experience to it, but after a few years, this will not be a strange experience. Also, when trees shed their leaves, it provides much more material for birds and other animals to make nests out of, and these nests would define an animal's territory, and provoke these animals to be much more territorial. In this part of the forest, the main species of tree, maple, completely outnumber the red pines, making them relatively abundant in comparison. As you can see, many saplings are also growing in this picture. These trees use more of a case selection method, by producing relatively fewer offspring than a grass population, but grow far larger, whereas the grass would be a form of R selection. This photo can also show both resource partitioning and nutrition limitation, as red pines are a scarce resource, and the cones that they produce will be wasted incredibly fast by animals such as squirrels, unless they can partition or ration the pine cones. Nutrient limitation is evident through the pine sap being limited to only so much for each red pine, which the red pines are in the minority in the plants.
Sexual selection is the choosing of a mate by the preference of one mate or the other. This can be broken down into two main groups: intersexual selection and intrasexual selection. Intersexual selection is when the female chooses the mate. This is also called female mate choice. In this, the female will choose the mate based on characteristics of the male, including their sounds or looks. Intrasexual selection is when two males compete for the female. This is also known as male competition, and the victor of the competition will get the female. An example of this would be if two male deer were to fight. with the winner getting the female. If an animal like a frog were to have cryptic coloration in this photograph, then it would blend in with the surrounding bark and moss in both color and texture. However, if it had aposematic coloration, then its bright, contrasting colors would be clearly visible to any potential predators in the area, acting as a warning. Some harmless animals imitate predators through Batesian mimicry. This can be seen in some moth larvae that imitate snakes in order to deter potential predators. Another type of mimicry is Müllerian mimicry. In this, two species that may not be closely related and share a common predator mimic each other's warning signals. This can be seen in bees and wasps. Also, coevolution is when one species evolution influences another's. For example, the moss on this tree may have to evolve if the tree were to evolve in a way that inhibited the moss's growth in some way. In this picture, it is very likely that pathogens are negatively affecting the tree. This pathogen could have caused a disease in the tree that eventually resulted in its deterioration. Although this single tree may be facing its end, there are plenty of other living organisms in the forest that make up the entire biomass of the area. Also, this tree's death will contribute to the process of global warming, as it will no longer be capable of removing CO2 from the atmosphere to replace it with oxygen through the process of photosynthesis. The excess CO2 in the atmosphere is a large contributor to the greenhouse effect, in which the Earth's global average temperature rises as a result of the sun's rays being more difficult to reflect off of the Earth back into space.